What's going on, homies? My name is John Solo, and welcome to another episode of Plot Twist, the show where we talk about some of the ideas and concepts that didn't make it into the final cut of some of your favorite films. Today we're talking about everybody's favorite superhero family, The Incredibles. Some of you may not know this, but at the time of its creation, The Incredibles was the most challenging film that Pixar had ever made. There were problems with the writing, the casting, and most of all, the animation. As we all know, the end result was incredible, but because of limited time and technology, some ideas had to be passed up. I know you guys are excited to hear about them, and I am super excited to share them as well, so without further ado, here are 11 ideas rejected from The Incredibles. The original title was The Invincibles. There really isn't much to be said about this one, but I just find it interesting that a subtle change can make a big difference. Others may be of a different opinion, and that is totally fine, but I just think The Incredibles has a better ring to it. It seems a little more unique than The Invincibles, which helps it stand out more, I think. The sequel was going to come much earlier. In the past 2 episodes of Plot Twists, I've talked to you guys about Circle 7 Animation, the studio that Disney created to make sequels to Pixar properties. The studio is quite infamous for their version of Toy Story 3, which was never released, but not many know that after Toy Story 3, they were planning on making sequels to both Finding Nemo and The Incredibles. It's interesting to think about the other potential storylines for movies like Finding Nemo 2 and Toy Story 3, and it is Disney, so I'm sure the films would have turned out at least alright. That being said, The Incredibles was written in its entirety by the director Brad Bird, who works for Pixar. Being that Bird was willing to wait 15 years to make a sequel that was at least as good as the original, I think having The Incredibles 2 come out just a few years after the first with totally different minds working on it could have been disastrous. I guess there is still a chance for that, but you can't deny that it's less likely. Brad Bird was not supposed to voice Edna Mode. Just like director Andrew Stanton voicing Crush, Brad Bird did not expect to be the official voice of Edna Mode. His playing the character at all was actually the result of having a hard time finding an actor or actress for the part. The closest they came to filling the role was actress Lily Thompson, who played a character some of you may remember, Miss Valerie Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. However, she turned down the role after hearing the temp track that Brad Bird had recorded of himself playing the role, and she said, "What do you need me for? You got it."
If you repress, you depress, darling.
The movie was envisioned as being traditionally CEL-ANIMATED. One of the most significant changes on the list is that this movie was not going to be computer animated. Believe it or not, it wasn't even going to be made by Disney. The Incredibles was planned as a Warner Brothers release, as that's where Brad Bird worked when he was developing the story. A few different events played into the film being designed as we saw. Bird also directed The Iron Giant, which was a good movie but was a box office bomb when it was released in 1999. After this happened, Warner's Animation closed its doors, and Bird reconnected with his old pal John Lasseter, who he knew from Cal Arts, which is the home of the A113 reference. Bird pitched the Incredibles story to Lasseter, who loved it and encouraged him to come over to Pixar, where the movie would be computer animated. The cell animation style was not completely thrown out though. The credits of the film serve as a representation of his original concept. Disney wanted this to be a live action movie. I said earlier that The Incredibles was the most challenging film that Pixar had ever worked on at that time, but I didn't get to fully explain why. You see, this was Pixar's first ever movie that used humans as main characters instead of animals, toys, or monsters. Creating an all-human cast required creating new technology to animate detailed human anatomy, clothing, and realistic skin and hair. Of course, Brad also didn't want to take any shortcuts like Pixar had with previous films, a la giving all of the human characters either short hair or styling their hair in such a way so that it didn't have to move. This is evident when you look at Violet, whose hair was constantly in her face, or Dash, whose hair was messed up every time he used his powers. The challenge became so great that Disney didn't want to pump any more money or time into the laborious animating process. They proposed that instead of animating the film at all, they make a live action movie with real actors. Naturally, Brad vetoed this idea. Bon Voyage was named Dom Perignon. For those unaware, Dom Perignon is a reference to the globally famous champagne Dom Perignon, a name that I am probably mispronouncing. The reason for the change is that the champagne maker wouldn't give them the legal rights to use their name. I don't understand why, as just about any real life item that's been used in a Toy Story or Pixar movie has blown up in sales, but I like the name Bon Voyage a little bit more anyway. Mr. Incredible's civilian name was Bob Smith. Not really a lot to go with this one, but I'm assuming the reason they changed it to PAR is because naming a character Bob Smith is just way too generic. The film had several different composers. There wasn't any particular reason that the studio had such trouble finding a composer, but they seemed to just hit a streak of really bad luck. Pixar's first composer, John Barry, was hired to score the film in his typical James Bond style, but left after recording just a few demo tracks. effects. After this, Michael Kamen was hired, but he passed away in the middle of scoring. The third and final composer up to bat was Michael Giacchino, who not only finished the project, but went on to score several more Disney and Pixar movies such as Up, Cars 2, and what's the other one? Ratatouille. Helen's sidekick made an appearance. After finding out the location of her husband, Helen Parr takes matters into her own hands and flies a plane to No Man is an Island with Dash and Violet. Originally though, Snug was to have flown the family in the jet himself and be killed when it was shot down. It was the animators who convinced Brad to have Helen fly the plane by herself instead of wasting time and money on animating a character that would only appear for a few minutes. The shot of Helen watching the destroyed plane sink into the ocean was apparently filmed when the script still called for Snug's death. This explains her overlong look as the wreckage sinks, because as filmed, it contained the corpse of her friend. I remember watching the final version of the scene when I was younger and thinking the reason she stared at the plane for so long was because she now owed her friend a new plane, and planes are ridiculously expensive. Jack Jack had another superpower. In what is one of the most memorable scenes of the movie, we see Jack Jack, the baby Parr, unleash his powers on Syndrome. He changes into a fireball, then into metal, and then into a demon. But there was another transformation that got cut as it was too complex to animate, and that was Jack Jack turning into some kind of goo. I'm pretty intrigued with what this would have accomplished against Syndrome, and then also the benefits of being a pile of goo in general, so I'm hoping they find a way to incorporate this into The Incredibles 2. The main villain was not Syndrome. In the original script, Syndrome only appeared in the very first scene as Buddy Pine. The main villain at that time was to be a character named Zarek. Zarek, or Z-Rex as his close friends call him probably, was only a rough concept back then, but his character has been progressively fleshed out as time has passed. This is due to him appearing in a comic miniseries sequel to the movie. As of right now, we know that Zarek is cold, calculating, and feared by both heroes and villains alike. He's the leader of the villainous group the Unforgivables and suffers from accelerated aging. The most notable feature about Zarek, outside of him looking like the human manifestation of Rufus, is that he is the ex-boyfriend of Helen Parr, and throughout the comics is shown to have an unhealthy obsession with her. Could this be the villain we have waiting for us in The Incredibles 2? I don't know, but I'm excited to find out. Thank you all so much for watching today's episode of Plot Twists. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, comment your thoughts or any questions you may have, also recommendations for future episodes of Plot Twists. Remember to share this video with anyone who loves The Incredibles as much as you do, and of course subscribe for weekly Pixar content. I hope to see you guys soon, and remember, John shot first.